Allison rocks.
Hi, Lori.
We'll turn the time over to you.
Cool. Do you want me to start with questions?
Do you have this? That will move your things forward, and then yeah, you can start however.
Do you want me to start with questions, or do you want to
However you want to do it.
Auditory processing? How many people have? Let me take a step back. I came here last year. I'm from Colorado. I was an educational audiologist in 2 districts in Colorado. Did a lot of auditory processing testing before I came here. How many people have heard from your charters, your small districts, anything about supporting kids with auditory processing disorder?
We do testing and we then put focuses in for those kids who have.
Perfect. We don't have enough focuses.
You can never have enough focuses.
You can never have enough focuses. That's the issue I've been running into. And I've been sharing with the outreach teachers that I work with, like Leah, I don't know if she's on the call, Carrie. Some of these schools have been asking our outreach teachers to support some of these students, and I don't know really what to do in that case. So right now, Janelle and Stephanie Watson down south and I have been talking about doing testing for auditory processing disorder, and I wanted to share how we're looking at that here at USDB. And then, of course, you know, if you have anyone who has questions or is saying we need an evaluation or anything, you can always come to us.
Well, and we've changed it that we're not actually testing and identifying it. We're now framing it as we're kind of a screener.
Okay.
Like, according to what we can do in our booth with our audiologist, here's some indications that this might be a possibility. We suggest you go out and do more. But with this, we will let you have a focus.
Okay,
That's
good to
we're
know.
determining.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
And we're in the process of trying to figure out how are we going to do testing, because I'll get into that in a second, but there are a lot of contraindications to doing the testing, because if you have autism, or you have a speech and language disorder, or you have a global processing delay, you're likely going to have auditory processing issues as well. So let's just jump right in. I hope everyone knows who your audiologists are. I just wanted to give you really more, because these haven't changed much, but in Salt Lake we have changed. Barrett Ray was our 4th year last year. She is now an audiologist. Woohoo! Emelina Johnson is our 4th year. She's also a CODA. So if you need an audiologist who signs way better than me, she's your person. And we do have Jarrett Goff, who's our audiology assistant, and those of you who work down here may have known her from when she was a teacher at Springville. And then Sarah Owens, if you know her, she was an audiologist in Salt Lake as well. That didn't go. So I have to use the remote. Okay. She now lives in Portland, Oregon, but she's our support audiologist, or our water boy. She does a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. So if you have questions about ordering, she calls herself Water Boy. She did it to me yesterday. I wanted to put Sarah Water Boy Owens, but she took it out of my slide. If you have questions about ordering, questions about equipment, things that maybe you're not sure Janelle or I could answer, but we're your audiologists, you would just go to her. And for those of you who work up north, we're covering for medical leave right now. So I'm doing a lot of the outreach up Ogden and above, all the way out to Logan. Barrett is doing PIP out there, and then Emelina is helping to cover KBS while we need it. And their the LSL is, I think, South Weaver is where those students are. Okay, so I wanted to just show, oh, I have to do both here. That's fun. A draft of what we're working on. How do I make it work?
Oh, I have to open it. Sorry. You're not totally independent here. Can you share? Do you have
That's why Vince is here.
do you have Zoom in yours? Let's do that.
I will let Vince do whatever he needs to do.
I think Vince needs an Emmy award.
I think Vince needs a raise also.
So I will always take a raise.
You can also take chocolate.
Vince, did you wear your cape?
You should have worn your cape.
He does have a cape.
I'm not wearing my cape today either.
Did Lori give that to you?
Superman.
I think it was in one of the USDB Friday letters you receiving your cape also, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, there you go. You're on the screen now.
All right, this is a sort of a mixture of what I used to do in Colorado and also how I've seen some other districts write their referral processes, and sort of based on the American Academy of Audiology guidelines. So one thing that I think it's really important for us to know about, so I'm just switching between the both.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, is that your presentation? Okay, there you go.
Okay.
I just wasn't sure.
Everyone online, can you see that okay, or should I make it bigger? Lori Potter, can you see my guidelines or my referral okay, or do I need to make it bigger?
I can see it great.
One thing I think is important to know is that auditory processing is complicated. And you can have students who have ADHD, speech language disorders, autism, behavior issues that can look like auditory processing disorder. And if I, as a diagnostician, don't know about those things, I might be making a diagnosis when really there's something else going on. So in the past, when I first started out, I had a student referred to me qualified for auditory processing disorder. 2 years later, they did a cognitive test and his average IQ score was 79. That is exclusionary. That is exclusionary, right? Of course, he's going to have auditory processing issues, and we can support that, but that's not a diagnosis of auditory processing disorder because APD is a diagnosis of exclusion. And that's really how we're looking at that here at USDB. And since Janelle's sitting here, if you have anything you want to chime in with, let me know. We are working on this part together, so I don't know how much we can require this. When you do testing or when you're doing your screenings, do you require psychoeducational evaluations as well as speech language evaluations prior to testing? I don't know your name. I'm sorry, you're in the green.
I am so sorry. I apologize.
Okay.
I had
It's
an
okay.
email come from the teacher and I was like, oh.
Understand.
Okay, tell me again. I apologize.
When you're looking at doing your screenings and supporting your students, do you require psychoeducational evaluations or the cognitive testing as well as speech language evaluations?
Not. We've just done the speech language evaluation. Generally, if they've been, like if they're on an IEP, we'll be like, is it other things?
Mhm.
But if they're not on an IEP, they're gonna go through the speech language evaluation, the CTAC, I think.
Mhm. Okay.
And then they'll go over, I mean, they're supposed to, as a team, talk about, do we see other deficits with this child?
Okay, perfect. Do you require that when you do testing?
Yeah, so I'm an audiologist for NEVO, and we definitely have the cognitive testing because the problem is, same as you, I've gone through all of the testing just to have the cognitive testing come back, and that invalidates everything that I've just done.
It absolutely does, yeah.
So, yeah, you really need to have that.
Right. And so we're looking at for USDB, since we partner with school districts, we partner with charter schools, I'm not sure that we can necessarily require that this testing be done. So that's something that's rattling around with our bigwigs. But it's something that I would definitely really push for to see, because I don't want to have a family. I would hate to have a family or guardians or even a student themselves feel like, I have this one thing and go down that route, and that route isn't working. And now maybe they feel like they've been failed, because I've seen that too. USDB is not going to be testing younger than 8. I know you can test at 7. I just really like giving kids the time to grow and to learn and just develop. We do need to have strong language abilities and good speech articulation because all of our tests are in English. Whether you're repeating sentences, words, or numbers, I need to be able to understand what you're saying. And if I'm not sure, I could be misscoring a test. And I wouldn't want to do that because in that case, I could say there is or isn't a problem, and I could be wrong.
Which is why we get it sticky when we have a second language learner and we don't really know.
Right,
But when they haven't made progress on the WIDA in 5 years.
right. And that's where the other stuff comes in. I do speak Spanish as well, and I wish we had protocols in Spanish. I'm not going to be the one to develop those. But you're right, auditory processing disorder doesn't just stick with one group of linguistic individuals.
I do have a question, because I'm right with you. I do test 7, but I totally see where you're
Yeah.
coming from. But I got a message from Utah Valley saying, I'm sure you got it too, saying that they are diagnosing 3-year-olds. And I asked for clarification on
Okay.
that, saying, how in the world are you diagnosing 3-year-olds with auditory processing testing? And I never heard back. Do you know anything about what they're doing, or?
I haven't asked. I've had some audiologists here in Utah and also in Colorado diagnose kids with autism as well. And I'm like, that's a global, maybe I don't have the background that I need, like that case history that would really give me a good convincing argument, because you can't convince me to test kids who don't fit the criteria or aren't perfect candidates, but I really need to know a lot of information. And if you look at the AAA guidelines, which are from 2010, so, they definitely need to be updated. It says take testing below 7 or 8 with a huge grain of salt, just for developmental reasons. And a lot of our testing isn't normed to those preschoolers. And so I'm not sure how you could get really good testing. If parents come to me with that information saying, I've got a 10-year-old now and they were diagnosed when they were 3 or 4, I will sit down and I will have that conversation with them, and I might even pull up resources.
I was just so surprised when I saw that.
Yeah.
So we did an APD training with USU last year, and they were showing about how even, and this is where it would have to be done with the clinical audiologist, but they were doing an ADR.
Yeah.
And they were seeing how the brain waves went with the sound waves. And do you feel like, we can't do that at school. We can't do that as educational audiologists.
No.
So, do you suggest they go and do something similar to that, to have that second opinion? Because that is a more objective point of view, really. Testing you do in the booth is objective, it is.
Right.
But
Right. I do, and I think even middle and late responses, if you're able to do corticals, and I know USU is just getting off the ground with that, I think those are very valuable results that we could be getting. And I think I've lost the majority of people here because now we're talking audiology speak. And if you have a Spanish speaker, or if you have someone who maybe can't perform the test because they have articulation difficulties or something like that, I would love to see that. I would love to even have the equipment to run that. I did a little bit of that when I was in Colorado at the university. Not going to be able to pay for that equipment here. No way. And then to have it calibrated and then figure out my protocols for that doesn't sound like fun. I quit the PhD for a reason. So yeah, I think the point that I'm trying to make is you guys are going to start hearing about it a lot. Carrie and I have already talked about several kids. Leia's another student I work with. You're getting one soon. Oh, good. And so this is coming about, and auditory processing, if I use an analogy I've used before, is kind of the diagnosis du jour of our time.
we have kids, it's like exploding. My first year had 2 or 3, and now I've got over probably 40.
And ADHD was very similar in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? Yeah. And if you look at, I should have brought this and I didn't. If you look at cortical testing, a lot of research is showing that if you have specific learning disability, speech language disorders, and APD, when you're doing cortical testing, a lot of the same brain areas hit. So I think auditory processing definitely exists.
Comorbidities.
And I think we're going to find out that there's something we don't know about the brain in the future that will help to tease all of this out. If you are hearing about people in the schools who want to do APD testing, we can't have a known peripheral hearing loss. Any kid with a hearing loss also is going to have an auditory processing disorder. That's an exclusion. There would be a very rare case where I would do APD testing on a kid like this. One case in particular, I had a student who went to the University of Utah, and in order to get 2 hearing aids, we had to do the testing even though she had a unilateral loss. And in that case, it showed it. Insurance needed that to get the second hearing aid. She's doing great with that second hearing aid. I agree. Yes.
Can I clarify, just because it's something I run into repeatedly? Is a child with a hearing loss, I don't want to say it how you just said it because I don't know how you just said it.
Okay.
Does not automatically have APD, as in the diagnosis of auditory processing disorder.
Right.
They have auditory processing difficulties.
Right.
That are similar to what would be experienced in auditory processing disorder.
Because there's an issue in the peripheral system, so central auditory processing disorder looks at the brainstem and above.
Right.
But because there's an issue with the peripheral system, you can't get the information good enough into the cans in order to have it. So I would argue that they have both in that case.
Okay, so the reason I ask is because this is what applies to us, and I know we talked about this last year, we've talked about this every year, right? Is just that in the districts, I have had a couple of parents that have come in and said, my audiologist said my child has auditory processing disorder, and because he has a hearing loss. But that's interpreted then that we have auditory processing disorder, and then we have to like contradict everything that they took away from that appointment with their audiologist.
And I think you're right, and I didn't explain it the way I should have, because that is exactly what I'm hoping we at USDB can help to tease out. Central Auditory Processing Disorder, which we also call APD, is a specific diagnosis under the umbrella of auditory processing disorder, whether it be peripheral or central.
Okay.
So yes, they do have an auditory processing issue, disorder, disability, you could maybe even say, and it's still not necessarily central,
So
because the blockage is out here.
Okay, I'm getting semantics because
Yes.
it's my presentation.
You're
Sorry.
fine, that's fine.
But you wouldn't necessarily then say they have, if you're writing a report, capital A, capital T, capital D.
Absolutely not.
But you would say lowercase a, lowercase b, lowercase b.
I would say auditory processing difficulties due to the peripheral hearing loss and inability to get information through the peripheral system into the central system.
Okay, so that's for all of us to understand in our communications with families and other professionals that may not be teasing that out that same way. They hear auditory processing disorder
And they go with it. That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Or can you just say they have challenges with processing language? Can you just use it that way and not say processing disorder and just take those words out and just say, oh, you're gonna have challenges processing language and spoken signal and that kind of thing too?
I think the way that I've explained it in the past when diagnosing individuals with hearing loss is I'll say, due to this sensory neural or conductive or mixed hearing loss, due to this issue in whatever part of the peripheral system, the level of the nerve or the level of the eardrum, sound isn't able to get in to this nervous system and get up to the brain the way that it should. And so your kid might be doing really, really well with his hearing aids or cochlear implants or osseas or whatever, but that still doesn't mitigate or fix the problem. And one other, if we talk about words, one other word that I absolutely hate is the fact that hearing aids mitigate hearing loss. They don't. Hearing aids simply amplify a sound and hope that you can get through a system that can then process that sound appropriately. And sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And that's why a lot of the audio, that's why we do word testing, we do sentence testing, we do speech and noise testing, right? To see how well is that ear system working with or without the hearing aid. So that's another fun topic to go into. And I didn't expect that. Go ahead.
Are you going to show us how you test?
I can get to it. Yeah, let me skip this. So we have this. I would like people to, if you're interested in looking it over and giving me feedback, I would love that because it's not ready to be sent out to people yet, sent out to Providence Hall, sent out to Murray School District, whoever we work with. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is, CAPD is a diagnosis of exclusion. So if there's any other diagnosis that could look like CAPD, we're not quite sure which diagnosis to go with. That doesn't mean that I, as an audiologist or speech language pathologist, can't help. So if you have someone who's really struggling in background noise, and I put a focus or Roger focus on them, and I give their teacher a microphone, and they can do it. I do a functional listening evaluation, and they go from 0% understanding to 100%. Boom, done. I've helped that without having to do CAPD testing. Does that make sense? One of the tests that we're hoping to always do is the Auditory Continuous Performance Test, ACPT. Have you guys ever done that? I love this test. It only goes, I until age 9, which is a bummer, but it is literally 15 minutes long of over 100 words, cat, dog, house, man, blah, 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 all single syllable words. And the kid either has to give a thumbs up or push a button or raise his hand every time he or she hears dog. And if you have fewer the number of responses than you should or more the number of responses than you should, they're excluded from APD testing because likely that's indicating inattention or hyperactivity or ADHD. So when I used to do testing, it was on a cassette. We now have it on a CD, thank God. And I would start here, and it's the worst thing to score. You are sitting there for 15 minutes, hoping that you can maintain your own attention long enough to see if a kid really did raise his thumb to dog.
Because you're hearing it at the same time they are, knowing if they're putting their thumb up for dogs. Okay.
Yep.
And that they're doing that in the booth?
Mhm.
That's something easily that like a school audiologist could do.
Yeah, I haven't done this one.
I've never tried it. You know, I've done some tests like the taps
Yeah.
or even the scan I've done portably with a computer, with a laptop. I wonder what the testing would show or research would show about the ACPT in a classroom setting. Just like bringing it out and doing it at the school and just stopping there. I'd be willing to try that. I'd be willing to try that with myself, see if I even pass it.
That's the guinea pigs do that, bring a
Yeah, let's talk about that. I love this test because if I had a kid who was not within the normal range, I would stop it right there and I would say, we need to continue. Not saying that there aren't auditory processing issues in the classroom, that there aren't struggles, but we need to look further into maybe this attention piece. Yeah.
I do have a question though, because I know ADHD and APD can coexist. So, but you're saying if they don't pass that, you're gonna stop APD
If they're
testing?
unmedicated, yeah, probably.
If they're unmedicated.
If they're medicated, it's gonna depend on my case history. Are they having issues with auditory attention? Okay, if we're seeing that in the classroom, then I might pull some auditory attention tests and change my battery. I also don't have a standard battery. Depending on what the kid is coming in with, I will use those batteries. I might run through like the scan or something that'll give me all aspects, but I'm really focusing on where the concerns are.
Okay.
You, go ahead.
What would you give it, are you giving the taps in the booth? What are you doing?
I do the taps. I just don't do this one at all.
Yeah, like we do taps in our district, so I'm just
But
like.
that's just one of many tests.
Right, okay.
I love the taps, maybe more than the scan, but we picked the scan because that's what I'm more used to in a test battery like this. I did mention earlier that you can have a speech language disorder and maybe that's not an auditory processing disorder. One thing, central auditory processing disorder. One thing that I might change my mind on and want to do testing is if you have someone who has expressive language scores that are way higher than their receptive language scores. And they've been getting the receptive language therapies, right? So that would maybe think, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. And again, is it the chicken or the egg? There is a lot of research out there that kids with ear infection, after ear infection with their young, or PE tubes placed, or perforated eardrums, have a higher likely of having an auditory processing disorder. Or if you have a child with a speech language delay, how do I know that it wasn't some sort of neurological central auditory processing disorder that caused the speech language delay? So how is testing completed? If you're gonna come to me, what link did I put here? I don't remember. Oh, this is awesome. Okay, let me go back. If you're gonna come to me, I want a strong case history. So I'm going to be asking my referrer, whether it be a speech language pathologist at Providence Hall, one of my charter schools, or it be another audiologist that we're just chatting, or one of the outreach teachers, I wanna know if they have an IEP, a 504. If they don't, and we're not looking to evaluate for that or reevaluate for that, what's the point of testing? You gotta give me a really strong evidence for that, because I'm not gonna diagnose just to diagnose. I want standard hearing testing, and with my standard hearing testing, I don't know if you guys do this, I will do reflexes, I will do decay, and I will do OAEs. And if I see anything on reflexes or decay, then I'm gonna send them to an OA. I'm gonna stop there and I will send them to an ENT. That makes my hearing test about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, but it really has helped save me and find lesions for 2 kids previously. It was scary. But now they know. And again, I'll start with the ACPT. And then I'll go into testing for temporal processing, which is how are you processing sound over time? And that's what you had asked me. What tests do we do? We have several tests that cover these different areas. Auditory figure ground. How well do you do when speech is in background noise? I suck at that. Auditory closure, dichotic listening. If something's presented here, something's presented here, can you ignore over here and focus on here? Or can you add what's here and here into the same word? So if it's like baseball, can you say baseball? Or do you just focus on one side, which would be the binaural interaction. So we have all kinds of tests that we'll do. And I want to go to, I don't know where this just went.
Do you feel like sometimes the audiologist that you may have in your district, because APD really is coming to the forefront like ADHD was, that especially if their training was in the past, how would they update themselves and come to where we are now? Because that's, I feel like in my district, that's a big issue, you know, when you were trained 20, 25 years ago, how do we keep up to date? Yes, teachers of the deaf, this is super helpful, but we aren't doing the testing. It's the speech pathologist and then the audiologist. And sometimes our audiologist may not be as
well, and I graduated 6 years ago, and I'm even reaching out to my friends like, hi, I know you work in hospitals, but have I missed anything recently? And I clearly have, especially in the realm of cochlear implants and all the technology with how they're moving forward with even just implantation surgeries themselves. One thing that I have done, and I haven't done it here at USDB, because there hasn't really been time, and I'm still learning how we do like our training at the beginning, like, you know, those first few days that we've got where we meet together, we do whatever, and we set up our classrooms. Previously, I would skip out on those trainings and I would do audiology online. And I would pick areas that I felt I hadn't reached, that I hadn't touched in a while.
Alison, can I make a comment too?
Yeah.
I think auditory processing is an interesting subject because there's not really one right answer. So, do you agree, Candy?
I can't hear you.
So many people have so
There's
many
not one right
different
answer with
opinions
APD.
about APD, and even professionals that are actively doing testing with APD, everybody's opinion is so different about what's appropriate, what therapy should happen, etc. So I feel like it's kind of like a mixed bag. So just because somebody had training years ago doesn't mean that they're necessarily out of the loop. They don't agree with other people. It's because it's such a crazy field.
Right, and there's not a standard protocol, and I think that's what you're getting at too, and I totally agree. I mean, I've been doing this 33 years, and so my training, but I do APD testing all the time, but that's because I've stayed up on it. So I think it would be great. I would love to know your battery. I love the fact educational audiologists especially are pretty good about getting together and going, okay, what are you doing for this? What are you doing for this? And it would be so nice if we could have a cohesive battery that we're all doing, including you guys.
because like how we're coming together and we are like Jamil, I'm so sorry,
And Candy.
you know, you guys, all ladies coming together as we do for outreach, but with the audiology, so that it does kind of, they learn from one another, because like we can go back and talk to our audiologist, but again, we're the teacher of the deaf, you know, we don't have the specific training in the different tests that you do. We just get to be the ones who go out and tell the teachers, this is the equipment and why,
Well,
you know?
yeah, and I think a lot of what I do is how many times have you and I met over this APD stuff, and as we're on Zoom, we're Googling different ideas, or we're talking about the class that you recently took and what I learned. And so I rely a lot on my peers. I mean, I've even called, sometimes I'm calling Jamie and I'm like, or Leah or Carrie, and I'm like, help me. What do you see for this kid? I don't know what to do. So that's,
This is Steph. Why don't we as audiologists have a separate meeting all together about this and maybe shoot some ideas around and we can talk about this.
Utah State will actually come and present. They presented on auditory processing and their research and things they were doing with
awesome.
it. Nancy Murray is also a fantastic person to talk to. She does a lot of the private testing for kids. And her reports are phenomenal.
They're very comprehensive.
Very thorough, yes. And so I wonder if too, it might help if you guys were able to create a Google Drive access where people could upload the reports and maybe like black out the child's information, but still have access to what a good report looks like. Because we've tried to do that in our district, but our audiologist isn't seeing the difference for whatever reason.
That's a really good idea.
But I think that could be really valuable because she gets really good feedback on, and our parents are happy to share whatever their reports are, and we can black out their stuff. But when you see like, oh, you could do these activities or these activities and these activities, a lot of them can be done at home. And a lot of them should be done at home because it's not a one time a week thing or a one time a month thing. It's really kind of like swallowing therapy or, you know, tongue thrust therapy or whatever.
Absolutely.
It needs to be more frequent. And so the parents really can be trained to be doing those things.
Right.
And in our district, we're seeing huge success with just the use of the NFM system. So,
yes.
And better than pulling them out because they're not missing the academic access. And so with our district, that's kind of where we're at right now. Of most of the kids that have APD, they're getting.
It was an accident for us to get them, but once we had them, we're like, order more.
Right.
And
they do.
We've got high school students staying for 3 days, doing phenomenal. And every week before school starts, their moms are texting me, where's your system? Is it going to be in there the day school starts?
Right.
Because they know how valuable it is. So
they are valuable, and there's a lot of research showing that. And if I can come in and do a functional listening evaluation showing that as well, that's even more proof because it's that one individual. Yeah, that's really important to me. So you asked, you know, if someone's had their training 30-something, 20-something years ago.
Right.
This is from the Buffalo model. The Buffalo model came out in the late 90s.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing.
And
like,
I still
what
use
is
it.
in the past doesn't mean that it's not good. Like, there are things obviously that we use, but it's like, how we're coming together and we're doing and having these discussions, is this same thing done with the audiologist also across the state in an outreach almost model, like, hey, this is where we're moving forward in educational audiology in our state. I just think, wow, that would be really awesome for them to get together, like, this is what we're doing, because some school districts don't have an audiologist. Some districts have many, some have one, despite being the largest. And
you know a lot about other districts.
no, I
likes to research. She's very good at research.
Where should I go that has an audiologist?
No, well, I like things fair, or I feel like sometimes there's things that I've asked. I'm like, and I know fair is not something possible really in education, but it's like, well, what's the normal caseload, or what's this, and how are you moving forward? I do want to know that.
Right.
You know, and like, if we have this information, I love that we're getting it because we're out there with the students, but I feel like it would benefit a lot of other districts as well. And I love that we have Nevo's audiologist here. But it would have been awesome if all of our districts had our audiologist here then, you know?
I think
especially with all the tech stuff we had.
Janelle will have more of the history. I don't know if educational audiologists in the state have ever really met. In Colorado, we met monthly. And there were like
We
100
don't
of us.
meet, I've only met, I got together with Dr. Naidu out of University of Utah, and we got together the educational audiologists that would come. So we had several from Granite, yours was there. That was the only time I've ever met her.
She was
Jeremy, and so what we did is we put together our protocols and what we're doing for APD, and we had a great discussion. And we also have it at like USHA, if they're coming to USHA, but not all of them are coming to USHA. We present on that too.
Well, especially because of how tech driven this has been these last couple of years.
I would love it. That's why I came here.
Right, but I'm just like, like as you're here, I'm like, this this would be so awesome if our district person was hearing this, you know, like.
We at Salt Lake, because Salt Lake is the largest area, right? And so the three of us up there cover over 1 million children.
No,
so
just
we've
1,000. Come on.
in their geographical area.
It's huge. Everybody's got 10 babies.
Yeah. I know,
Yes,
I know.
that's true. But we've been in contact with Shannon. I don't know how to pronounce her last name at Public Health. She's the audiologist. Winneck, is that how you say it?
Yeah, something like that.
Because people are struggling with screenings, and she's going to start putting together a task force for screenings. So if you get an email from her soon, like it's coming in November,
Right.
because we've gone to her saying, why can't parent volunteers screen? Or why can't people use otoacoustic emissions for kids who can't respond behaviorally? We've also been talking with a couple of the audiologists in the medical realm who do APD testing. They've reached out to at least Janelle and maybe Stephanie too and me. They want to start up a task force too. And I would love to meet, and I would love to know what people are doing. Like if I'm doing too much, because I tend to take on too much, maybe like my peers could like smack me down and be like, calm yourself, girl. And then I'd actually sleep at night. So I would love to be able to meet. I just don't know how that's worked in Utah. If we need someone to start spearheading that, I nominate the three of us.
I nominate you.
Oh, I'm finding friends, Adam.
I'm happy to help any way I can.
I would love to,
Like,
even
I
if we
don't
just
know,
met once.
I just am like,
I would
this
love
would be amazing information for.
Well, it's recorded, so we can share it with our audiologists too, so maybe that's something we should all own, go back to your district and share it with your audiologists to make sure they watch it.
By the way, we invited everybody's audiologist to this. We tried to make
Oh, we're not judging you.
invitations. I invited all of ours. We have 1, 2 show up, one's online, so.
But it's really a conference for teachers, not audiologists.
I know, but when everybody saw the CI info, everybody was like, can we invite our audiologists? And I said, yes, this is open to
It'd be nice to
audiologists.
do an SLP audiologist, teachers for the deaf.
Right, because all of our realms are so
They overlap.
overlap so much.
We have a
So
lot of our
at the beginning
SLPs
of-
doing some of the testing too,
So
so.
what I'm
Can I
used
ask
to.
who's in your districts, and in USD, who's serving these kids? Because I know right now, we're not, but who's serving them? Is it SLP serving them? Is it,
I think
what's happening?
I think it's a mixed
Your
bag.
SLPs.
Ours are
Wait,
SLPs.
ours are SLPs because the SLP is at the school full day,
Yes.
full week typically. And
And-
so we can't get there enough to do it.
Yes.
Or they
And
don't
for
serve them and
us-
we do the FM system. Or we do both.
Yeah.
And then we wean them off the therapy and just do the FM system on a 504.
And I would love to share more with how the districts are doing that, because for USDB, everyone, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's the outreach teacher, sometimes it's the SLP, sometimes it's not.
And I think
So you guys
it's
are
good to
open
know, because people move,
Mhm.
and people move districts. Like, I have a kid who's gonna be moving to Mapleton, and I had a mom freaking out, what if they can't get a focus, what if they can't, da-da-da-da-da. And so yesterday I was like, hey, what do y'all do with APD, do you have focuses? Like, yeah, we do. And I called that mom going home from this yesterday, and she was in tears, because she was so stressed about that, because she has 2 kids with APD, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, there are other districts that don't have focuses or don't do anything with APD, and that kid would be screwed moving.
Right.
And that's not fair,
Or in Georgia.
I have an
they
issue
only
with
do
fairness.
linear.
right? But you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
yay, that makes me
To
happy.
come back to this, I'm gonna show this really
So
quickly.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
We took you on a
This
tangent,
is
I
the
apologize.
Buffalo model and how you can organize individuals with central auditory processing disorder into different profiles. And I really like it because it not only gives you, so if we look at this one, disorganized notes, impulsivity, poor planner, not only does it give you an idea of how they might be behaving in class, but it also gives you some management strategies. And one thing that I've really been working on, and this is nowhere near complete, so it looks pretty, but it's not ready. And I'm sorry that it's sideways. But if I'm doing testing in the auditory memory realm, here's what tests I would do. So she just walked out, but these are some of the tests that I would do. Or auditory integration, here's some tests I might do. This is done. So I'm sorry, it's number 1 sideways, and I don't know how to flip that. And also not done.
It's in here?
It's in my slides, yes. And I think everyone has access.
Actually,
to
we
it.
don't. Could you share that with us? You have to open up access so we can all access it.
I thought for all of these documents, I thought I did. This one, maybe not, because.
We
and I
can't get to your
have it.
PowerPoint, so if these are linked to your PowerPoint, we
Can I
can't.
get to my PowerPoint?
No,
Oh,
it's.
I did open it up.
Did
I'm
you get
so
in?
Sorry.
Did you guys get in?
Two
Did you
of
get
them,
in?
so I have one.
I made a
can
copy
access and the
again.
other one.
Okay, last
So
night
one's
it
locked and
wouldn't.
one is not.
Last night it wouldn't let me do it, so I made a copy.
Oh, I'm really
Did that.
sorry, Adam. I have another one that's not done and I took it out, so I'm sorry about that. But
Maybe that's.
it's based on research and it's taking me a long time and maybe that's what I did. But here's what auditory processing looks like compared to dyslexia, compared to autism, compared to ADHD. And it's been a really big undertaking. I feel like I'm doing a capstone all over again. So it's gonna take me a while. But once that's done, I think I'm gonna share it with audiologists or maybe some SLPs who know people just to give me some ideas, thoughts. I'm sorry I didn't include it in here, but I didn't want to give you half good information. I'll share it with you and
Can I
you.
give you a thought on this too? Because one thing that we talked about that would be super, super helpful.
Yes.
And we talked to our audiologist and it never happened, but it would be really helpful in like an assessment write-up to have, if it's digital, to have hyperlinks of activities that would tie back. Did you guys already talk about that? Sorry, I had to go to a 504.
No, we didn't.
That's what I
Okay.
looked at too.
But that would be extremely helpful for the entire team to say, hey, this correlates with that, or this kid, because of this, maybe a journal would be appropriate, because that's the problem with, my personal opinion with the problem with the APD testing is that it's like a, yes.
Okay.
But does it have hyperlinks into activities?
It will,
that you can do? Okay.
because I have activities that are in different sheets that I just
Yes.
haven't done here. I wish I had
That's what I
an
was-
audiology student to take that on for me. You will get that. It's gonna take me a while to pull it together.
That's something that we can share with parents, but my issue is that the ours in particular, is sending out reports that are very vague. And then it's like, well, so they have APD weaknesses, what does that mean? Is this a kid that needs services? Is this a kid that is just an FM system? Is this a kid? So then, as a team, we're getting that testing and we're like, we're not a specialist on this, so I guess we'll
It's
put a
more,
system
it's
on,
still,
and
it's
if
more
it
of a
needs more, we'll
screener.
add more.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's very, like, it makes us look ignorant in a way, because we're interpreting data that we don't do the test. We don't understand what that data even looks like or means. So I feel like that's something that would be
Let me
helpful
stop my
too.
screen share for a second.
If we totally
Vince, I
derailed
ruined my
you,
life.
we are so sorry, but not sorry, but like, thank you for
No, we are.
answering our questions.
So just so everybody knows, there was the presentation she sent me and I couldn't get it to share with all of you. So last night I downloaded it and made a copy so that if she's changed any of it today, you won't get those changes, but it is there. Also, with what Terry has just said, we need to remember that we are not audiologists. We are teachers of the deaf, and that is the point of this conference. So it was more like, these are some things that are coming down the pipe. We want to work with our audiologists, but we are not diagnosing this. If we have kids that have this, yes, we're working with them, but we're not in the diagnosing
But the more
phase.
explicit that the audiologist can be to us, the more helpful it is for us and the team to
Because
figure
we're the
out how to
messenger
best
and the
support
explainers. Like, we're
Correct.
sitting in the meeting and they're like, what does this mean?
So
You know, and we're not.
So there
the
again, if
audiologists.
we're not, if it's out of our wheelhouse, we need to find somebody that is in that wheelhouse, and an audiologist is in that wheelhouse. So if you're in a district that doesn't have an audiologist present, you could contact one of our great audiologists in the north, and they could probably help describe the findings to you, or in Nevo or Alpine, I'm sure somebody would help, okay?
Got it.
So I have a lot of these, and this is just temporal processing, but like, given a sentence, how do you work with stress? So you play games, you sing songs, you clap stuff out, right? You sing prosody, you practice these games. I have one that I'm not finding right now, because of course I'm not. Maybe it's this one. Here's integration activities. If you have a kid who is really struggling with auditory integration, please open.
Like, I love the idea, like getting these, like,
I know.
I don't mind sharing these. I can give them to Adam to share out.
Yeah,
but
I
there's
would
gonna be a
love
huge
that,
caveat. These are old.
that's okay, that, right? But
I mean, that's
is
like
no
my
longer
first
valid.
district 7 years ago.
But that's the
So-
thing, like, integration activities are gonna be integration activities.
So integration, a lot of research is showing that if kids can't cross midline, we're also struggling with integration in the auditory system. So then you can get games with like Bop It. Nobody plays Bop It anymore, and that also works really well for
Simon.
a lot. Simon Says, I mean, you could play Rummy, yeah. Twister is a really good one. A lot of sensory integration stuff for kids with the integration difficulties. So I have a lot of these. I can share them. You're just gonna have to let me wipe out the previous audiologist to me 7 years ago and my old district. So I can share that, yeah.
I think that part of, not the overwhelming nature of this, but the overwhelming nature of this is that a lot of this is not in our wheelhouse, as I was talking about. And so I think that as long as we can, as Terry's saying, we're the explainers, we're the ones they're looking to initially to explain this because the audiologist may not be in that IEP meeting or whatever. We can explain it, we can say, here you go, here's some activities, and then walk away. And
Yes,
let
and
the people
I would
whose
love to
wheelhouse
share
it
that
is.
with you. And I think one thing that's also really important, I was referred a student who's had several concussions and now they have auditory processing issues. Is that an educational need, or is that a medical need, or is that both?
Right.
Because as far as I know, this particular student never received any therapies to remediate those concussions, and concussions can essentially is brain trauma, right? So I think having some explanations between those two different realms as well, which is really hard to grasp. If you have a speech path who's right here in my school, why do I have to go through my insurance to go do something? It's hard. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these rehab programs. They're so fun. And if you wanted to look into them, I absolutely love Acoustic Pioneers. This is called Feather Squadron. It's their test. And then they have Insane Earplane and Zookeeper Skyscraper. And there's a lot of research coming out from Acoustic Pioneer. They're based in Australia, showing that it works. Soundstorm, I've played around with a little bit. It has much more mixed results. And again, I guess the question is, as I'm sharing these remediation strategies, who's the one providing them? I don't have that answer. And then there's the listening program, which really focuses on listening to music. And then Listen S, which is on Phonak. You can download it. It's on the Phonak website. So there are programs out there, and there are some that are super fun. Like, if I could play these all day, I mean, maybe I would become, if I could do Insane Earplane, maybe I could actually become a musician and hear the difference between pitch. So what do you do? Long story short, reach out. I'm really busy, and so it might take me a while to get back to you, but I don't mind reminder emails. So if you think it's been too long, I haven't responded to an email, nudge me again. Here at USDB, we do have a process to determine the best supports, and we will work with you as well as we can. In terms of getting your audiologists on board, the best I can do is reach out, show up with a bag of cookies, sit down, commiserate with how much we all have to do. But I would love to start just meeting other people in the state, because I learned so much from everyone here. Everyone has such a wealth of knowledge, and it's so different from mine because we're all different people. And then really quickly, if you have any referral to send to us, they are getting lost, at least in Salt Lake, they're getting lost in our inboxes. So please use our droplet link. And if you are requesting HAT from me or from any of the audiologists, I need to know the hearing devices. The issue we're running into right now is we have to use a release of information to share with Primary Children's, Peak, anyone who is not within USDB or not part of our contracts, not part of the school. And so if I don't know if a kid has Phonak or Oticon hearing aids, I can't get them the equipment out as quickly as possible. I already briefly touched on this. Many schools and districts are struggling with having time and resources to screen students, and we're working on that. And the state audiologists are going to hear more from Shannon. And this is just a blank copy, or one that Barrett was playing around with. But this is what our release of information looks like. So I am going to have to start sending this out to every private audiologist. We need all audiologic information to assist with IEPs and to help with continuity of care, because a lot of us at USDB are doing testing or maybe modifying programming, and we need to be able to share that. We also have it in Spanish.
So when they're doing hearing aids, it's sometimes helpful to, at least I have parents do this, to flip the ear hook over and take a picture of the series too. Because now you've got devices, you have to have an audio shoe or not have an audio shoe. And so, and if that's not on the back, because sometimes kids have picked it off, you can open the battery trap and see the serial number inside the battery trap.
And I have been asking families when I get these referrals to just take a picture or tell me, is it a B, is it a V, is it an M, if it's Phonak. If it's Oticon, I just go straight to an Edgemite. But sometimes they get busy too, and they don't know what they're looking for, and they might send me. It's a behind the ear.
Taking a picture of it is helpful, because then it's just there and it has all the information.
Yeah.
And we still see safaris and senseis, so.
Yeah.
I do too, they're great.
You know, and then like, here's and like, it makes it super long, you know?
Here's the FM9. Yeah.
All the good stuff, especially when they're little. I had a question.
So I'm sorry that got a little bit more audiology heavy than I meant to with CAPD, guys. I hope it's helpful. I know we're gonna start seeing it more, and you're gonna start seeing it more, and so just reach out to us. I think I've got 4 in the process right now. One of yours is gonna be my hard one. So, thanks.
Thank you, Allison, for coming. Any other questions? No, thank you.
Sorry, this is online. Can I ask Allison a question real quick?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, so Allison, if a student has been diagnosed with auditory processing disorder, on the eligibility page for HI, I think it's like the third question is like, do they have a functional hearing loss? If they have diagnosed APD, do we click yes on that box?
So does everyone know on the eligibility for hearing, you have the hearing impairment one, and then the third one is functional hearing impairment, which would be APD. Leia, I'm sorry I didn't answer your question. My slides, yes. The answer to that is yes. If there's not a hearing loss peripherally, like their thresholds are normal, then it would go under that box.
Okay. And if that box is checked yes, is it still a hearing impairment eligibility, or do we have to get a different eligibility?
APD falls under hearing impairment from what we've been.
Yeah, but.
Okay, thank you. So I am still new to the eligibilities here. In Colorado, that was under specific learning disability, but it is here under hearing impairment. So yes, there's not another eligibility. Unless there are other issues going on with the student, maybe he's multiple. Yes, that one in particular would be under the hearing eligibility.
And they can use.
Thank you.
If their academics are really, really bad. So
You're welcome.
They can choose to use HI or SLI if the academics are really bad, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, you can choose,
That's
right? It's
okay.
always which one fits the kid the best. You can have as many eligibilities as you want. We only report one to the feds.
Yeah, ours excludes it, from my understanding at our district, it's an exclusionary thing that they're not
What
hearing
is?
impaired if they're diagnosed with.
So how are they diagnosing them? Because it's.
No, they're putting their eligibility, they're putting them under SLI.
Oh, interesting. The reason for that third box, which is the functional listening impairment, is truly for auditory processing disorder, central auditory processing disorder.
Yeah.
But if you
when
have
look
speech
it up,
language
'cause they were
impairment.
fighting over does speech cover it or does hearing cover it?
That's what, yeah, and we're still fighting, yeah, I guess we're still
And that's where
fighting.
we found it was under hearing impairment, and so we're like, oh, I guess we're holding the bag, but like, we're not in the school every day, and so then speech is covering it. But it, yeah.
I could see where that argument would come, yes. But technically, no matter the kid's label, services need to be appropriate for their needs. So you can be, I mean, I could have a kid
Well,
under
that's what
this.
we figured out, and so it was like,
Yeah.
well, if it's hearing impairment, you guys should be on it, and it's like, well, not necessarily.
What's the educational need?
Yes.
Well,
Right.
so then my other question though is that because we've also had this debate, if they have a hearing loss, like you were differentiating before, it's not a central hearing, auditory processing, but it is an auditory process, a peripheral auditory processing, but then should that box be checked or not? So that's where.
It's only the first one.
It can't.
And see, that's what we've been instructed otherwise, so it was confusing.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of Leia's question, because she's heard that too. It can't be checked. If they have an actual peripheral hearing loss, it has to be box one.
Right, okay.
I'm running away. So
You good? No, don't run away.
I mean, I'm 3 minutes over.
Thank you for joining us.
People tell
It's not a robot, it's actually a
I'm
section.
gonna send you a picture of the USDB toy robot, so you can put it on the next one.
Thank you. That'll be our Dundies for next year. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.